name's Claire Johnson, no relation to Bruce Johnson, although we're both doing readings today. And I'll begin with the first reading. Today we explore resistance through Martin's eyes. Not the Martin of monuments and holidays, but the Martin who wrestled with fear, doubt, and responsibility in real time. We begin with his words. This hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed nonconformists. Our planet teeters on the brink of annihilation. Dangerous passions of pride, hatred, and selfishness are enthroned in our lives. Truth lies prostrate on the rugged hills of nameless Calvaries, and people do reverence before false gods of nationalism and materialism. The saving of our world from impending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a non-conforming minority. Continuing with words from Reverend Jim McGaw, who's a UU minister, he says, "We are living in dangerous times. There are so many distractions from the work before us. Each day, the current administration in Washington manages to come up with yet another assault on common decency and common sense. Each day, there's a new excuse for feeling overwhelmed or despairing. Each day, the sheer volume of absurdity seems to numb us, to lull us into a sense of powerlessness and complacency. But we must not become complacent. Martin Luther King did not fight and die just to become a soundbite in yet another corporate public relations policy. He did not fight and die just to become a touchstone for the delusion of post-racialism. He did not fight and die just to become a poster child for the myth of individual exceptionalism. King fought and died in the hope of sparking real and lasting transformation, and in the hope of building a resistance to conformity to unjust systems of oppression. The false gods that King named are alive and well today. We see before us an ever-growing abundance of evidence of nationalism and materialism run amok. The dangerous passions of pride, hatred, and selfishness are enthroned not just in our own lives, but also in the life of our nation. And truth itself, lying wounded and prostrate and bleeding on the ground, is endangered in a way that it has never been before. Our hope, our only hope, lies in what King called creative maladjustment, in refusing to be lulled into complacency, in recognizing and calling out injustices when we see them, and in demanding something more than lip service and window dressing. Through Martin's eyes, resistance is not about being loud or reactive, but about refusing to adjust ourselves to injustice, simply because it has become familiar.
Good morning. To see how that resistance took shape in his own life, not in hindsight, but in the moment, we turn now to Dr. King's own words, written from a jail cell in Birmingham. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in that purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious, negative peace in which the Negro passively accepted his unjust plight, to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. Here are some words from UU minister, the late Reverend Mark Ward. There is something about history that conveys a feeling of inevitability. So it is easy to look back at Martin Luther King Jr. sitting in a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama in April of 1963, pencil stub in hand, and imagine him confidently writing what he knew would be a work for the ages. I bring some of those words to you today from King's letter from Birmingham City Jail to remind us that the truth is far different. In fact, the 34-year-old preacher who landed in a bleak cell on Good Friday was unsure whether the act of civil disobedience that brought him there had made any difference at all. In January 1963, King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference decided to target Birmingham with an economic boycott during the Easter shopping season. But as SCLC protests began, few joined in. Many middle-class blacks and about 3/4 of black clergy joined most whites in opposing the protests. Sitting in the jail, the Birmingham News had been smuggled into his cell, and King wondered what to do next. He found inspiration for his next step on a front-page piece entitled A Call for Unity, where 8 prominent Alabama clergymen urged our own Negro community not to support the demonstrations and to unite locally in working peacefully for a better Birmingham. Now, let's pause a moment and consider that appeal. You recognize the tone, right? We've all heard it, and I'll bet many of us have used it. And here Reverend Ward says, I know I have. Let's just calm down now. I'm sure we can work something out, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody likes conflict. But what happens when what appears to be reasonableness is just a way of masking obstruction, a way of sweeping under the rug valid complaints of injury and oppression? There comes a point when we must pivot from the response that is reasonable to the one that author Dr. Cornel West calls radical, a solution that goes to the root of the problem. We find the ground laid for that radical king in the letter from Birmingham City Jail. We know he was depressed from lack of response to his protests. The column, though, ignited a fire in King. He began scribbling on the edges of the newspaper and then writing after sheet of toilet paper. It is here that he lays down how he understands his calling to a radical activism. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, he writes. He acknowledges that the purpose of his action is not to make peace, but to stir things up. There is a type of constructive nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth, he says. Nothing much happened to the letter right away. It was months later that people returned to that letter and found in it a blueprint for King's actions. We are comfort-seeking creatures, but there are times when we need to name the tensions that are among us and go to the very root of the problems. Resistance, through Martin King's eyes, isn't nice. It's a decision to bring what's hidden into the open, not to shame, but to heal.
To see where resistance led Martin and how far he was willing to follow it, we widened the lens beyond Birmingham and look again through Martin's eyes. And I quote, "There are literally two Americas. One America is beautiful in its situation. And in a sense, this America is overflowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. In this America, yes, millions of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this America, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. This other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the ebullience of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily, searching for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions. They find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Here are some words from Reverend Leslie Mills, a third-generation UU who serves as minister at a congregation in Elgin, Illinois. And I quote, "I realized that, like most Americans, I'm not quite sure what that tells us. Keep going, okay. I realize that, like most Americans, I'll speak louder, my current engagement in Martin Luther King Day had become completely passive at best and performative at worst. Creating Martin Luther King Day felt no different to me than running through the motions of any other government holiday, a brief remembrance of the tragedy that once was, and a quick celebration of how far we've come. To me, it's clear that there has been a massive miscommunication in this country surrounding Martin Luther King's message. The reality is, Martin Luther King had much more in common with today's radical left social justice warriors waging war in the streets than we were ever taught, and that our whitewashed, watered-down version of his ideals are actively being used as a weapon against current civil rights movements that I believe he would have advocated if he were here today. In his day, Martin Luther King was hated. He was considered a radical threat to America. He was loud, he was angry, and he disrupted everyday American life in a desperate plea to be heard. And now he's dead because of it. And I believe that leaving this out of the story while simultaneously painting it as a story of the distant past is doing us a direct disservice when we're discussing how to advocate for change today. As his daughter stated just last year on Martin Luther King Day, "Please don't act like everyone loved my father. He was assassinated. A 1967 poll reflected that he was one of the most hated men in America. Most hated. Many who quote him now and evoke him to deter justice today would likely hate, and may already hate, the authentic King. Our country's choice to view Dr. King through rose-colored glasses is doing nothing but further oppressing the black community while praising ourselves. The very point of protest is to make the oppressors so uncomfortable that they have no choice but to change. And while Dr. King's goal may have ultimately been one of peace, we still have an abundance of radical work to be done before this is realistically an option. Through Martin's eyes, resistance is the work of dismantling racism and every system of oppression that distorts our humanity and binds us all. It calls us to disrupt injustice where it is entrenched, to tell the truth where it is denied, and to align our lives, our institutions, and our voices with the work of liberation. Can we see the world through Martin's eyes? And when we do, can we act accordingly? May it be so.